a newest edition of China EVs and More podcast with Lei back in the United States. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Anyone who's keen to ask us any questions, feel free to leave them into the comment section. We're streaming live on X and YouTube currently. Jeez. Sorry. I'm freaking. In the next hour or so, my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We'll talk specifically about some of the things we did over the last couple of weeks. For me, 18 days. And Lei, currently still in China, we'll talk about some of the things that he's about to do. So if you're new to the show, welcome. To our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you smash the subscribe and like buttons and help us get the word out to other enthusiasts who want to know more about what's going on in China and how it affects the world. My name is Lei. I'm the managing director at Shanghai Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility space. I read a free weekly newsletter that you can that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A well-rested Lei and a not rested too. Can you please introduce yourself?
A overworked, jet-lagged, waking up at 3:30 a.m. in the morning and missing China, but also glad to be home too.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be in your spot in 2 weeks. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to going back to the other home. This is my home, kind of, and this is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is a long overdue episode number 208. Long overdue because we've been having fun in various ways and forms, and over the last we touched down in China, in Shanghai, on April 20th.
Both
And
of us, same time.
It's been 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
And because there's so much things happening, and we did that. The last 2.5 weeks just went by like a flash. First of all, let's thank Neil again for giving us a Neil ET5,
Lending us.
lending us 2024 ET5 for the road trip that we completed on May 5th and 6th from Beijing to Shanghai. And tomorrow, the new ET5, ET5T, ES6, and the EC6, known as the 5566, the refreshed orders start tomorrow. And this just followed
No rest for the wicked.
Yeah, this just followed the updated Li Auto L6789 Smart new editions that launched yesterday. And for as long as we've talked about these companies, Neo, and for as long as you and I, in our previous capacities, in your newsletter, in my previous role as China Auto Review, having reported on Neo, ever since the beginning, ever since the 2014, 2015, this was actually the first time that we had this experience understanding the power swap process. And it gave us a great understanding of that process. through this trip, and this was the second consecutive trip that we did during the Beijing Shanghai Auto Show time. And I think it's important to say that for us, we kind of make an effort and a point to stay for long during the auto show. We don't zoom in and we don't, come down and spend a couple of days at the Shanghai Auto Show and then get out. For us, I think it's valuable that we have the time and the resources to actually be on the ground and experience these vehicles for us to be able to share this perspective to our audience. And I feel
Let's
actually
be
very
honest,
lucky.
Lei. Let's just be frank and honest. To your point, we don't swoop in for 2 days and tell the world, "Oh my God, these things are game changers." They want us to be there. Our contacts, they really enjoy and appreciate the fact that they get intel from us and they listen to us and ask us questions. And so, for the sake of full disclosure, Neo did not pay us to drive from Beijing to Shanghai. We had complete editorial control over all of the content that we're going to be posting. Some I still haven't, or we still haven't edited and finalized, but that'll be happening in the next few days. I want you to ask all these other people. Now, car reviews are different, but if you're trying to be an analyst, a true analyst in the space, you have to disclose whether or not you're getting paid by competitors and or the companies that you're trying to represent. You can have any opinion you want, okay? But hiding the fact that you're getting compensated is probably not, or I won't say probably, isn't really um,
Well,
being objective. So
well,
that's the
certainly,
polite way of me trying to say that, okay? So
yeah, and piggybacking on that, hopefully we can, for those brands out there, please, if you want to sponsor us on the China EV some more, please, we're open. you know, but we're gonna continue to do this. We did that. I tweeted, right. We fast charged our way from Beijing to Shanghai in an Xpeng G9 in 2024. We power swapped our way from Beijing to Shanghai in a Neo ET5, and in 2026. How can we top that? I mean, that's just the epitome of what's happening in the Chinese smart EV space. That every year, not year, but probably every week or every month, that there's something new that we get to try to do and top what is already available. And that's actually really what reflected at this year's Auto Shanghai is just the pace of what I would call companies trying to bring you go. Um, and maybe I joke next year we'll megawatt flash charge our way from somewhere to somewhere. you know,
and
uh,
what's important, because we did a little bit of reflection, or at least I did in last week's newsletter. We'll do a little bit
yeah,
more in this episode. But
sure.
if we look at the last 3 or 4 years, here's the thing. You can't not be at these shows and think you can speak intelligently, because you're just reading other people's content and then spouting what you've heard. Because
Yeah,
just the 3 years post COVID of these shows, everything has evolved. Now, year one, when I was there and you were there, I had gone during COVID, during one of the shows. And so I got to see it from the very beginning, like the real transformation. But, it was a 22, it was Shanghai, right? And then
21,
everybody
21.
came in, or 21, everybody came in, right? And then,
Oh, you're
uh,
talking about
tw-
23
yeah,
when
23,
everything
sorry,
opened.
23.
Yeah, 23.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody came in, was surprised. 22 in Beijing. it was more or less a coming out party. And this year, to
Because
me,
22
is
in, yeah, 22 in Beijing, sorry, never happened. So,
yes. So,
yeah,
so 21 is what I meant when
yeah,
the woman jumped on the Tesla. I always get those 2 years confused because to me, that 2.5 years when I was in
it,
China was kind of a blur because those are the COVID years. But so last year was the coming out party for the Chinese EV makers. And then this year, there's a maturity about these companies and a confidence that the products do stand with the foreign automakers outside of China. Not so that's the other part I want to emphasize. I think they began to be confident last year, and now we see complete confidence in their products that they're world class. The second thing is that there was a bit of shell shock, continued to be shell shock last year for the foreign automakers, and you really, really saw not much effort from them. But this year, you saw Volkswagen, Audi really come, and Buick, to give them credit, Cadillac as well. They were the foreign automakers that tried to make a splash this year. And I think they had levels of success. I'd love your thoughts on that. They had
yeah,
levels of success because Buick, Volkswagen, they both showed off concepts. Buick's vehicles for the future, the Electra sub brand, I thought those concepts looked great. Now, can they execute interior, exterior, and user experience? That's the key. But we've all seen these foreign automakers now partner locally. The GM brands with Momenta on the intelligent driving, Volkswagen with Xpeng and Horizon and things like that. And so that should help them move faster, okay? Because they can't make these things, quote unquote, in the time frame needed to put vehicles on the road that can be competitive with the Chinese. Now, with the Chinese, and again, give me 30 more seconds to kind of talk through this evolution, Lei. There seems to be this maturity, but also this blandness because everything on the exterior design is looking more and more similar. And then from a feature set standpoint, there aren't that many differentiators because everybody's using Snapdragon, everybody's using Orin, and it's like which version is the latest. That's why Neo is launching these new ET5. That's why Li Auto, because that's what's going to get you sales. And every 6 months, there's always a new a new version of a vehicle, a refresh, or a price cut. And the only feature currently due to the price war that matters to a lot of people is value, is the price. And we'll likely see a bit more maturity in the brand next year in Beijing because that's really the only way you're going to start to differentiate yourself. You know, trust in the brand. Hopefully, like next year, we'll also see in Beijing a whittling down of some of these brands because the weaker brands can't attend, they can't afford to, they might be strapped for cash, things like that. So, you know, what do you think? Do you agree, disagree? What parts do you agree? What
oh yeah,
parts do you disagree?
100% agree. I mean, if we look at, I think talking about the Shanghai Auto Show is as important to talk about who made it as it is important to mention who did not make it. And you right, we see the evolution. That's the hi-fis. This year was Neta, and the big some of the even the big foreign automakers, Hyundai, Kia, Jaguar Land Rover, Polestar, some others. There's quite a few brands that were in Beijing that were not here, and also I think
Tesla.
Tesla is one entire topic that we can spend days on. But uh, also
Xiaomi was
one of
there
the
but wasn't
narrative
there.
of who wasn't here was Xiaomi CEO Lei Jun, and he chose not to come here because of probably everyone knows what happened, and because last year Xiaomi and him basically kidnapped the Beijing Auto Show and took over the narrative of the new models. And then the year before, so if we look back the last 3 years and focus kind of on the foreign automaker perspective, is 2023, the keyword was the shock. And then 2024 is the keyword is accumulation, because they had that shock. They made the decisions, Volkswagen investing into Xpeng, Stellantis into Leapmotor, et cetera, et cetera. And 2025 was sort of a counterattack. They kind of found their mojo, their stance. There were more people visiting and checking out the cars. I went to all the big reveals of the, not the reveals, but the important cars at ABB, the four-letter Audi E5 Sportback, the Mercedes locally produced CLA L, and the BMW iX3 in the concept form, but with the locally developed software behind that Panameric iDrive. And then remember, I think in 2023, it was that when Zeekr had the X, and you compare it to the Audi stand, there was nobody at the Audi, but there was people waiting to get into the X. But this year, I noticed all the foreign brands, the Volkswagen, because they had this so-called in China for China models. And I think that the consumers, the visitors, they were piqued. So I think that mojo came back. They I think I was at the Volkswagen Group media night, and I talked to Oliver Blumer a little bit, and he told me something that was really interesting. Was he feels that the three Volkswagen ID, the Era,
Aura.
Evo, and Aura, from the three different joint ventures, as well as the Audi, not only the E5 Sportback, but the four rings Audi A6L e-tron, because they have, in terms of design, in terms of the local content, in terms of, let's say, Momenta, in terms of Huawei, they're on these vehicles now. They've capitulated to the Chinese tech companies. And so the models they put out attracted the visitors. And it was interesting to sit in these vehicles. And just what I did was just sit in the back and hear these Chinese consumers. They go in, they talk about it. They think, oh, this is not worth it. This is nice. How much it could be. Then it kind of give you an idea and ask the question, are the foreign automakers back? But I think next year is really the ultimate test, because as we've seen, they're still losing money big time. They're still losing market share in China big time, but they have these products that they think will make that comeback, especially in the NEV space. I think that was one of the big narratives at the Shanghai Auto Show.
I'd like to add, Lei, that they always kind of played lip service to the where our products are for Chinese consumers. Bluma said this year that there is no global car, tastes are different, emerging trends are different. And I feel like the GMs and the Fords now get it and are very genuine about putting products on the road in China that really reflect Chinese tastes, as opposed to shoehorning global features that are probably 5 years behind what's trending in China. And I got some play for whatever reason. I got some play at the AmCham event that I was a guest of, where I said everybody and their mother has level 2 plus intelligent driving, and it's true. I can't really think of any player in China, foreign or domestic, that we take seriously, worth talking about, meaning Lei, that doesn't have some sort of entry on the intelligent driving side. And luckily for us, we've tried most of them. So yeah, I think there's
It is, yeah.
there's more genuine, like, we understand the importance of accommodating and designing for the Chinese consumer more than ever.
It is incredible. Again, we emphasize the iteration and the growth and the development and the capability of these type of NOA, NOP, whatever you want to call them, how they can be so much better. A year's frame to compare does not do justice, right? Because that's a long, long time. And the NOP plus we drove on ET5, the latest through the latest software was incredibly good
Let's go through the
on the
numbers.
highway.
We left Monday morning. We got to Shanghai or Beijing, yeah, Shanghai Tuesday night about 8:30. I want to say I dropped you
Hmm.
off around 8:15,
Hmm.
8:30.
Hmm.
So we spent the night in Xuzhou, which
Xuzhou.
was
Hmm.
about uh, let's say 600 kilometers. We drove day one. You the night before swapped the battery out, and so go ahead, take over. There were a total of 6 swaps. What else am I missing?
So just some of the big numbers: 1,300 kilometers or 800 miles. We took 2 days to do it. The first day 700, second day roughly 600. 6 swaps, and we happened to swap at Gen 2, 3, and 4 stations. So, and it was consistently on the 3 and 4, between 4 and 4.5 minutes from the minute you park at the designated spot and you push a button to the minute the system says the battery is done. 4 to 4.5 minutes, very consistent.
So just to
Um,
be very clear, there's a little area that's designated where the Neo vehicle parks, and then it detects you're in that parking space and it prompts you to press a button, and then it autonomously, this is where it is autonomous because we don't have to do anything until the green light pops up, and it backs you into the swap station exactly where it needs to be. And to your point, over the course of 3.5 to 4 minutes, depending on the swap station, Gen 2 to Gen 4, it opens the compartment in the bottom, takes out the battery, puts the battery away, and then puts the new battery in there over, again, 4 minutes. And depending on the queue, why don't you tell them a little bit about 3 kilometers away, 2 kilometers away, what we're doing or what you're seeing on the screen, Lay?
so the power of the power swaps, I think it's important to call these power swaps instead of battery swaps because I think it's the importance of the power of the cloud. And the minute you leave from Beijing, you enter the destination in Xuzhou, the system automatically recommends the power swap stations that you should stop at. And along the way, there's a automatic queuing that happens in the background because at the same time, other users might be going to that specific station as well. And you see the number of batteries available and how many people in front of you, those number constantly changes. But I think all the 6 swaps, with the except for one that we had to wait for another vehicle, was when we got there, we did the swap. We did not have to wait. And the system requires you once you're close about less than a kilometer, it automatically puts in an order. And then within 3 minutes, you have to start the swap, or they will cancel that order to be fair for other people who may be queuing. So this is, I think, the power of the cloud that to make it, very convenient and seamless.
I don't know what the delay is between what it's showing on the screen inside the Neo with what's really happening at the power swap station, but let's assume that it was real time. The two things, the one thing that was uh, I wasn't sure how to take was when the instrument panel has the CLTC estimate of range, and there was another number. Let's assume that's kind of the Neo real estimate of
The
range,
real, mhm.
and there was probably a 10-15% delta between CLTC and real range, depending on if the range was low. I think the number becomes more accurate or converges. So that was a little bit confusing
Yeah,
to me, but that's me
but
probably not
yeah,
understanding the Chinese part of some of the
but as
instructions. So
but after the trip, I think as a, let's say, a owner of the vehicle and doing this long trip and uh, doing the power swapping, I had the confidence that the vehicle will get to that power swap station with enough range left, so there's no anxiety.
because there's
Um,
enough of them.
yeah, so I think that's the peace of mind that I had. That again, not only that, but just starting off the trip and never worrying about range anxiety because we trust there's over 3,300 stations and growing, and they're pretty much along the expressways. If
Well,
in the service areas, if not at least close to the expressways.
let's explain that. So we took, because we were specifying Suzhou as our stop, we started on the G3. So for folks
Which
in the
is
United
the
States,
Beijing Taipei expressway.
yeah, the Beijing Taipei Expressway,
Taipei, yeah.
Beihai, right? And
Jingtai, Jingtai.
Jingtai, Jingtai. And so for the folks in the Midwest, there's an I-75 that will get you from Beijing to Shanghai. That's the G2.
Yeah.
Uh, we took the G3 because we were actually heading more west of Shanghai. And so once we got onto the G2, uh, that was the main highway to Shanghai. So one would assume that those two roads, probably the most popular to get down to Shanghai from Beijing, are going to be filled with swap stations. I don't believe the rest of China is supplied like that yet. But again, Neo
So
is making calculations based on where their drivers are and where they anticipate sales to be. So, assuming that those swap stations will be populated in lower tier cities in this year and the coming years, I think is a safe
yeah,
assumption.
so right after the Shanghai Auto Show and right before the holiday break, NIO achieved the county coverage in Guangdong province, right? So they've been saying this for a while that by the end of this year, they want to achieve county coverage, coverage on the county level in I forget the number, but several provinces. I think at this point, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong, and probably another province has already achieved this county level coverage. Um, and I'm hearing there 3,300. It should be at least over 4,000 by the end of this year, and perhaps more. I may have forgotten the number, but again, continue to bed out the power swap network. And the important thing is, Firefly is not able to swap any of these stations. Uh,
But we saw Mona
and
in a power swap station
the Envo.
or Anvo. Sorry. Oh, geez. Anvo. We saw an Anvo.
You're
Um,
jet lagged, so you're excused.
Yeah, I
Cut you
don't
some
normally
slack.
make those types of mistakes. The one thing that I think is important for you to detail, Lei, if you will, is the inventory levels of each of these swap stations was different. There were 4 to 11, I think. So can you
Sure.
explain and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, once you swap out the battery, your battery could become someone else's battery. That's simply how it works. And then once it's swapped in, it'll be in that queue to be recharged. And we could be swapping in a battery that was recently swapped out by another user. That's the simple way of putting it. And sometimes the system will say, okay, because of the scarcity, this battery you're swapping in is not charged to that. Usually it's a 90%
They're,
SOC.
they're, they're never charged to
Right.
100%. None of them.
Yeah. So, but we never. I mean, I think all the batteries that we charged in showed 90 to 93% ish SOC, which is about over 500 kilometers CLTC. It's the 75 kilowatt hour battery pack.
And maybe you should also just mention that peculiarity that remedied itself on day two, where it was telling us to go into the city center. I think that's kind of worth mentioning.
On day one, actually,
Yeah, on day one,
day
yeah.
one, all the batteries power swaps. We had to drive about 6-7 kilometers from the expressway exit. Those are again automatically recommended by the system, and I
Because
did
you
have
you the night before,
yeah,
Lei, you had put presets in to
I
to
did have
tell.
the expressway and power swap prioritized. So could
Meaning
have been
that
a stretch
you
of
wanted you preferred the swap stations right off the highway at the rest stops, not in
right,
city center.
or right on the highways, the service areas on the highways, right?
Yeah.
Not having to exit out of the expressway. That's what I meant.
And the
So
reason that is a big deal is because think of having to drive 2 or 3 miles into Manhattan to swap, and you might not think of Suzhou as Manhattan, but there's 9 million people in Suzhou, so it's not a small city
yeah,
relative to the rest of the world. It's a small city
yeah,
relative to
yeah,
China's tier one cities, but losing or having the swap in the city could lose you 30-40 minutes easily.
yeah,
So
yeah. But it was again no complaint. I mean, it was don't have to wait 30-40 minutes like we did last year for each fast charge. That's the peace of mind.
and I'm gonna give us the championship belt. I don't know too many non-domestic Chinese analysts that have driven a total of 2,300 US miles or 2,300 miles using level 2 plus intelligence in China
Yeah, that helped
from
greatly,
two different
and
brands.
yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
in I feel comfortable saying this. We did have some interactions or interventions, um, but pretty I felt pretty safe, specifically on the highway. Now I drive every day in the US on highways. And so it took me a day or two to get used to uh, driving in China again because my alertness needs to be there right away. And when you get into Suzhou, there's you and I were talking about this when we were driving out from the hotel. This feels like Beijing 10 or 12 years
well,
ago.
the stops in Changzhou, in Tai'an, in Xuzhou, there's a little bit of difference in each of those cities, right? The way, the type of vehicles we saw, the type of mopeds, the type of scooters we saw, they were different. So,
And remember when we went to that restaurant that we decided not to eat at, and you were driving, you had to take over because there were so
yeah,
many mopeds. And
yeah,
so this is where FSD is going to be hamstrung because it's using only Chinese data. And I don't even know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know how to explain how they're training the system in China because it's not FSD. It's FSD light. They don't even call it FSD. And
Yeah, I think, yeah, they changed the
there
name, I think.
was an analyst that said that FSD is going to, or these robotaxis are going to have problems. To say that now, it's obvious because they're using the existing FSD software. But if if this guy would just go to China and try out some of these other robotaxi services, some of these intelligent driving services, it would be obvious that FSD is not this runaway system that dominates. I mean, we tried Waymo, Lei, and guess what? Waymo is great. It doesn't go to the airport. And how would that work with a bunch of Sanlonchus, a bunch of mopeds? Would it have difficulties? Of course it would, because that's not the
Mhm.
data it's collecting currently in the United States or in the West. But
Mm.
for we can only judge it based on our our eyes, how we feel in the vehicle, right? Because we're not trying to grade it technically, okay? But I also feel comfortable saying that you cannot, and these aren't level 3 systems where you can stop paying attention. You have to pay
No,
attention.
no.
So,
Let's let's go back to the Shanghai Auto Show a bit.
okay.
What were some of the memorable models? Which models did you think was impressive? Anything that stood out? I have mine.
So
I
the Mercedes Vision V, that looked
okay.
awful to me.
You're
It
talking
wasn't
about the
very
notorious ones.
well. I'll talk about some of
I'll add to it.
the
I'll
yeah, the
add to it.
nice ones and stuff. Um, Generally speaking, I think the avatars are pretty vehicles. I really like, and this is where I'm hoping that me chirping at Frank Wu a little bit will help. I really love the overall design of the Zeekr vehicles. I think there's a maturity to the 007, and then there's a 007 like wagon coupe coupe. I was lent a couple of Zeekrs for the couple of days that I was in Beijing, and I told you this story, Lei. I'm in Gongti Beilu, which is close to CBD in downtown Beijing, right off the Third Ring Road, and I'm staying at a hotel. And they drop the cars off at a parking structure right behind the hotel. And I get into the car and I'm like super excited because I'm going to see a friend. And I have 45 minutes to get to like 6 kilometers, basically like Liama, right? And I'm late, by the way, to go 6 kilometers in 45
Yeah,
minutes because I'm like
yeah.
super excited. And then I turn right into a traffic jam. I'm like, oh man. And I remembered why it's terrible to actually have a car in Beijing. But
Yeah,
when I was
that's
able to
true.
drive the car, oh man, the 007, big fan. And I also had a 009, the MPV, and it drove really well. It's very heavy,
Well,
obviously,
we've
but
driven that in the US already, so
yeah. So, um, so I really like the Zeekr. The 9X was great. Again, the only thing that needs to be massaged a bit more is the front end, so that
mhm,
it's not so it seems
mhm.
garish relative
Yeah,
to the rest of the vehicle. And if you look at the 007 interior, the front console, I think it looks really mature. It was really well thought through, thought out. Now,
mhm.
I had also had a chance to sit down with Frank Wu and Stefan. You remember his last name, the head of design for Zeekr?
Fila,
Yeah. So,
Stefan
and
Fila, the former,
talked to them a
Bentley
little
head
bit
of design.
about that. Yeah, talked to them a little bit about that. We both attended the Zeekr event that was during the media days on the Bun on the White Tan. and they both Steffens kind of talked about Lincoln Co. and Zeekr Design,
And
and so go ahead.
yeah, no, speaking of, right? So my I did a few recaps, my overall summary, right? It's the foreign automakers, including foreign suppliers, they were more Chinese, and the Chinese were more international. I think that's another big narrative, and the Zeekr event, for the fact that this was a special event, I think, for the international media. And if you look at all of the Chinese brands, the Cherries, Chang'ans, JACs, GACs, BAICs, NIO, the smart EV startups, the international presence, I think in recent memory, for me, I think it was incredible. Just the amount of foreign faces, foreigners that you saw. Uh, I don't. I think I have to go back to the before the pandemic to see this many international faces, and that
And let me
shows
add
kind
to
of the
that.
globalization. Cherry invited 5,000 of their international dealer media to the show, and
And
should mention this already also that we met so many of our kind of friends of the show and the industry. I met several Western, mostly U.S. Reporters that came to China for the first time, came to China for their first China Auto Show.
well, there were
So I'm
some that
glad
came to China for the first time too.
first
So
time. And the guy from Motor Trend, I forget his name, he said last time he was in China was 2000. Uh, and I think I am very glad that more. I mean, we've been talking about this, but it's never it's never better than you yourself to come and see an experience. And I'm glad
and
that
let me
that
make this
happened.
clear. Just because they came for the first time in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and they were like, oh my God, this is happening. We've been talking about it forever. So
Yeah,
they didn't discover anything. It was already happening. They just weren't aware of it. That's a key difference here. Something didn't all of a sudden happen. Now, the other thing that I want to add to your point about the foreign media is that in years past, it was, wow, these cars are surprisingly good. Can we trust them? Are they reliable? And who are these brands? Now, the foreign media is like, when are they coming? Because the assumption is now, yes, they are world class and these companies are ambitious. Now the reality is that there's, out of all these companies that want to go abroad, the ones that you have to look out for are Chery, which sells as Jayco in the UK and Australia in particular. I think it sells as Jayco in parts of Europe too. Zeekr, BYD, obviously, Xpeng, Neo to a lesser extent, because they're still kind of struggling domestically, and uh, Li Auto also to a lesser extent. But who else would you, let's say, highlight that we'll see more of in the next 18-20 months outside of China, besides those
Leap Motor.
brands? Yes. Okay.
Every single one of these brands, I think that there's some plans, some more aggressive, some reserved about uh, being on more markets outside of China. Is whether it's the Chinese legacy ones or the smart EV startups. Uh, you know,
And since you mentioned Leap Motor, I think what's notable was that none of the French, Citroen and Peugeot, weren't at
right.
Shanghai Auto,
Mm, mm,
but Leap Motor's technology is likely to underpin some of their newer vehicles in Europe in the
mhm,
coming years,
mhm.
is my guess.
Yeah,
Renault was not
yeah.
uh, present at Shanghai Auto, but again,
Mhm.
they were impressive in Paris during the motor
Yeah.
show. And so So yeah, to your point, it
Mm,
was good seeing these people that we see at the motor show circuit. And again, it was also very, very apparent who was missing, who seems to be prominent voices against Chinese electric vehicles, but again, weren't present for the last few shows, which
uh,
is, I mean, there's an inside joke between a handful of us, um, that we'll keep to ourselves, but I think
yeah,
most people know who I'm referring to, anyways.
yeah. And then
And speaking of which, we should, because it's 9:50 right now, so I'll look to see if there are any comments. But I do want to advertise that you and I had the pleasure of sitting down, and again, we need to thank Neo for this because all I did was ask, and they said yes, no problem. So no one was compensated, but we went to a Neo house in Jing'ansi next to the largest Starbucks reserve in the world, and recorded a Max episode roundtable with Ethan Robertson, who AKA is Wheels Boy, Joe Shen from TechNode, Ed White or Edward White from the Financial Times, and we recorded for over 2 hours, Lay, um, and it was at a
yeah,
Neo house, and we didn't really talk about the auto show. We meant to talk about the auto show, but we got a lot more broad, and I don't want, I'm not one for hyperbole, but it was an insider's view because guess
yeah.
what? Jill lives there, Ethan lives there, and Ed lives there. So it's not like outside
We kind
eyes
of
for the
live
first
here.
time. I'm sorry?
We kind of live here
Yeah.
because
Well,
we're gonna be back again in the summer, so it's
yeah, we'll be back.
almost like
Yeah, so we both have plans to be
yeah,
back in the summer. But
but yeah,
that was really cool. I'm
we
we'll do some things behind the scenes, but that roundtable was more successful than I thought. Now, the video is gonna be a little bit wonky
humongous.
because I'm not a videographer, I'm not a professional content guy, but the audio should be really good, which is the most important.
We Some of the stuff we talked extensively was one BYD, two we talked about
Tesla.
Geely, and just as we were talking about Geely, their Hong Kong listed arm Geely Auto Holdings acquired or made the announcement that they're acquiring Zeekr and making it private. So putting Zeekr under the Hong Kong listed um, arm. We talked about Geely consolidation, brand consolidation. So that was interesting. And yeah, that was long, to be honest.
No, but
Uh, but
it was something we would do anyways because whether it's on DMs, we formalized it by recording it, but we talk like that to people offline all the time, and that's, I think, one of the big factors and bonuses
yeah,
of
mhm.
why people listen and watch is because we do uh, have access, I think, and I think respect amongst the people that we care about, anyways. Like, and so uh, it's I think because we're Asian, we're not as outwardly thumping our chests and tooting our own horns too much. That's not the Asian culture way, but we should do a little bit more of that just because we're out there getting it done, and we're taking a lot more steps than others in the space. So
Well, like you said, we're just nerds. I think I've covered this industry for 20 some years, and I couldn't think of doing anything else but just to just to be on the ground, see, hear, listen, experience, talk, discuss, and um, and very grateful for it. Back to the auto show, I was gonna say some of the notorious models you mentioned. Um, what was the first one? Oh, the Vision V, right? With the FAW grill and I think overdone interior. I think that was a lot talked about. There's a few models, right? The Zeekr 9X is referred to as the Hangzhou Bay Cullinan. There was another Cullinan wannabe,
The
the
reason
Woohoo.
it's called Hangzhou Bay, Lei, obviously you know, but to our audience, because Zeekr is in Hangzhou.
Yeah, and the Hangzhou Bay is where Geely's R&D is based in Ningbo. So, and then there's the Woohoo Cullinan, the Jetor Zongheng G900 with a couple of turbines sticking out of the exhaust pipes. The reason being, Chery started out making ships, so they want to beat Yangwang U8 to be the vehicle that can wade in water. Okay. And then there's a couple of other notorious models. One I saw a Ion UT, this from GAC Ion, in a Xiaomi Ultra paint and the sport strips, and they actually called it the Ion UT Ultra. and then and then there was the Aura Lightning Cat shooting brake edition. Right? There's still these vehicles that make you kind of uh, but I'll tell you my the ones that I thought stood out in terms of design, they were great. The Huawei Pearl concept and the MG Cyber X, maybe because of Joseph Caban, who joined the SAIC Motor from Volkswagen. I thought the Buicks uh, were really good. I actually think the biggest surprise of the auto show was the fact that Buick announced ahead of the auto show
Well,
that
yes, they had
they
an
are
event.
now.
They had a standalone event.
Yeah, yeah, they announced this Xiaoyao architecture, this Electra sub brand, the integration Momenta, uh, and there's three new concepts, right? They call it the precursor, the car, the SUV, and the ultra luxury MPV concept. I thought that was quite a big surprise to me because I didn't think that Buick was announced anything.
There's a Pulse.
But yeah, but this is not so much. Um, I don't think it was so much a GM China kind of led event. It was a Shanghai GM. I
Hmm.
think the joint venture was a little bit more autonomy making these type of events. So I think they're doubling down. Volkswagen, obviously, not to mention the Japanese. Uh,
But
and
let's talk about two of the three Volkswagen branded ID series. There's Era, and there's Aura, and then there's Unix. The Era and
yeah,
Aura, I believe, are
yeah.
BEVs using XPeng platform.
The
Last
the
gen
the I
platform
yep,
though.
the ID Evo, as a matter of fact, is one of the first G9 platform based vehicles. And then the ID Era is the big SUV with the extended range
Yeah, so
EREV.
that's an EREV, not a
Yeah,
BEV.
well,
I think
from
it's worth
Shanghai Volkswagen. Yeah,
kind of
and then
separating those.
the ID Aura, the sedan, is from FAW Volkswagen. All actually built off of the ID code from last year, and the three wanted to show kind of the individualization from those joint ventures. Uh, and they're not going to be available until 2026 as production vehicles. So that hence the real test is next year. even though we say it's a counterattack from the foreign automakers. But really, the true test of putting on a show or a dough is 2026.
Well, the goal has to be Lei, because next year it's in Beijing. Has to be they're going to show production ready versions by the
Mhm,
show. And it should be noted that I'd heard some rumors about the Beijing Volkswagen team, most of them having to move to Hefei now, or a lot of them. I won't say most. So
mhm.
I think the Volkswagen Group is still trying to trim its forces or trim its staff in China, because they're right sizing and there's currently way too many overhead to support the number of units that they're currently selling. The and okay, continue. Anything else on the car
Same
side
for
that you?
Mercedes, same for BMW. Mercedes local, they're launching the locally produced CLA-L. It's rather small, the interior space. In it. I did really like the BMW Neue Klasse, the panoramic iDrive, because you had to sign up to experience, to have someone talk to you about there's there's the panoramic, there's several screens. I really like the way how the HMI with the user looking on the road without the HUD. So I think that's a huge bet that they have in the Chinese market. But again, localized production not happening until 2026.
They're
Uh,
probably the best positioned, I think, of the ABB to take advantage of the changes if they can reconcile pricing. But I also feel that the whole panoramic, because the
remember,
Audi.
remember these are, I think the number was 70% of the code was written locally, software, because they have to fit the Chinese market, Chinese consumer taste.
Sure,
Same for
but
Mercedes, Volkswagen, right?
the E5 has the whole panoramic. I mean, E5 had uh,
Yeah.
monitors for the mirrors that bowed, like curved in, and that was a lot. Uh, and I'll add two funny things. Cadillac, during their press conference, we can talk about that a little bit. There was a Ukrainian dancer. There was an unveil for the press event, and
Yeah.
I was late because this was probably the one of the most attended press events, because they are they invited, what's the ping pong player's name? I forget. Chen
Oh,
something.
the world champion. Yeah, I forget his name.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he is now a sponsor of Cadillac. So there was a car that had a tarp under it or over it. He was sitting inside the car and they unveiled the car, and there's a dancer that slipped. And that moment went viral because they showed the dancer slipping and then panned to the ping pong player's face, and he was just kind of, like surprised look on his face. So that went viral. But I think for Cadillac that was good. And then the second thing
And
is on social media that went viral is the E5, the Audi E5 frunk.
that was recently viral.
Yes. So, or
Micro
lack
fun.
thereof. The
Micro
frunk,
fun.
oh my goodness. I don't even know why they bothered put anything
Speaking
in
of
there. Oh
speaking
God.
of, that puts it into huge comparison with the Envo L90. And
L90.
all they did at the show was showing the front. And I actually went over there and sat in it. I held up a sign and I almost wanted to squeeze myself into the front, but I don't think they let me do it. But I mean, that thing was huge. Uh, but the question is, does that sell the Envoy L90?
No, that's to me, that's
No,
that's not really a defining feature that's going to differentiate itself.
But that I think that was the only thing they showed, and they show even Li Bian doing with a fishing rod, right? So I thought that was cool. And speaking of right, the Cadillac Vistique will looks like to be the first one adopting the Hesai lidar behind the windscreen, the front windshield,
Using momenta
using
intelligent driving.
Momenta and using a special glass supplied by Fuyao. Okay, for that to work, for the lidar to work behind the windshield, because on our trip, did you notice that the lidar on top of the ET5 was smeared with bugs?
Hmm.
And it luckily it did not affect the performance, but it's something that, right, these innovations that people are thinking of, right, to help with the performance. And then I thought
For
Cherry,
those really
yeah,
quickly, Lei, for those wondering who Fuyao Glass is, if you want to watch American Factory, it's a Netflix documentary.
well,
It
yeah,
highlights Fuyao Glass entering Ohio.
Fuyao Glass is the CATL in the glass space. So
Yeah.
that's basically who Fuyao is. And then I thought Cherry brought back the QQ. I thought that was cool. Um, and then speaking of funny things that happened, right? The Envo L90 I tried. I even though Lei Xing was not, I shared in the group, was not at the show. How did Xiaomi attract crowds? What they did was they
Giveaway.
gave free hats that had the Xiaomi Life on it. 5,000 hats every day to visitors. So on one of the second to last day I visited, I actually decided, what the heck? I'm gonna join that queue. And that queue was wrapped around the building and then back out again. So the wait wasn't that bad. And so I picked up my hat. Along that queue, since the booth was directly next to Envo, the Envo salespeople were carrying free bags and asking people waiting in the queue for the Xiaomi hat to scan the QR code and get the freebie, the bag, to get some leads. Uh, right? That's part of the auto show that we probably people don't talk about. And also, again, every single stand, there were people live streaming, KOLs or just people hired by the brands to live stream.
I sent a
Uh,
30-second video
starting,
of
starting
that.
from the first day, from the press day. And yeah, and I thought the Geely Galaxy showed the Starship 战舰. That was interesting, the boxy shaped. Um, and then I think the Japanese Toyota had a few new models.
Mazda had a
Honda,
model that got talked
Mazda
about.
EZ60.
The Japanese
Uh,
came with some nice cars.
yeah, GAC showed a hype tech Earth concept, a shooting brake. Thought that was nicely designed. And then not all, but coffee. Coffee was a huge feature at many of these Chinese brands. And in order to get one, you had to do a scavenger hunt. So that to learn the brand until you have those stamps, and then you can get the coffee. And then humanoid robots, flying cars was a huge feature.
There's a flying
And many
car in CATL's booth.
CATL,
Obviously, Xpeng.
yeah, Xpeng, GAC, Cherry. Uh, one of the coolest things I did, and we were at the CATL press conference on the 21st, is after the day after, they invited some media to their Shanghai facility where they had this chassis concept that you could drive in their facility. And I drove that for like 2 minutes. That's pretty cool. And CATL, by the way, in that press conference, mentioned that they're not just a battery supplier. They are
Mm.
in the words of Robin Zung, a new energy industry pioneer.
So they're repositioning themselves effectively.
Yeah, they
So
do motors. They do e-motors. They do chassis development.
so
In
what
addition
they're trying to
to,
do, Lay, is move up the value chain from being a supplier to being a provider. And I think that's important because I also think that there are other suppliers, non-Chinese, that are trying to also move up the value chain from contract
Mhm.
manufacturing to actual consumer brands. I think Foxconn is one of them. I went to Taiwan for a few days during May holiday, and so got had a few meetings, and I still believe that Foxconn is really trying to position himself. And I should mention that while I was in Taiwan, I used Uber. Uber is available in Taiwan and was picked up a couple of times in a LuxGen, which is the Foxconn brand. Uh, and it was nice. It was,
you know,
you know, I think that
speaking of,
again, unless you're on a plane visiting these countries and companies, you can't experience the LuxGen and how it would be competitive in the United States. You can't even talk about it. I actually have videos and was really impressed. Now, again, it's not likely to hit the United States anytime soon, but guess what? If China is tariffed out of the US market for quite some time, there's a huge opportunity, especially as Slate comes online and tries to sell us a $45,000 200-mile range vehicle. It's unreal. So there's a huge opportunity in the United States for other ex-China EV companies if they want to get aggressive to get first mover advantage. Now, VinFast tried to do that, but they just ran out of money, and the vehicles that they had launched into the U.S. market weren't finished products. They were basically pilots still that needed uh, some final engineering, let's say, finishing touches. And so, but yeah,
yeah.
it is 10-11 lay. The last
So
thing I will say,
yeah,
go
sure.
ahead.
No, go ahead, and I'll add a couple more things.
The last thing I'll say is I'm very, very, very shocked that media aren't picking up more the fact that Li Bin pulled out two chips from his pocket during his press event and uh, announcing that the ET9 is going to use their own silicon starting later this year. Xpeng also has
Oh,
announced
it's
that
already
they'll be
on it.
using their, yeah. So
It's already being delivered. So
yeah, so the that as we're looking at trade talks this weekend between China and the United States, is that going to be on the table? Because China's already restricting rare earths and minerals. And so these are probably the most important things with regards to high technology. Now, consumers' goods, like everyday goods that you and I buy in the United States, that's very important to us as consumers. But from a strategy and global competition standpoint, it's got to be silicon and it's got to be rare earths are two of the things that are on the table that need to be discussed. So
what wasn't there viral videos that came out of the US of people queuing up to buy the Insta 360? What was the model number?
oh,
Five
I
or
don't know.
something?
All
Five.
I know is that the Pocket 3 in China is sold out.
And I just went one last night. She told me the same thing. 2 to 3 months.
没有货,没有货.
No stock. Yeah, zero
Yes,
stock.
no inventory.
Yeah, I was gonna add, you know, speaking of Uber, right? Just the last few days since the auto show, Uber announced deals with Momenta, Pony, and WeRide. And somebody actually joked that these three companies becoming the three concubines of Uber. So funny that these are collaborations outside of the U.S. and China with an American company and three Chinese autonomous driving startups. Uh, and if you ask me who the hottest company at this year's Auto Shanghai was, the only company that come up is Momenta, because I was at the press conference and the number of announcements they made: Buick, Cadillac, Toyota, Audi, Honda, and most recently with Uber. Uh, Cao Qidong, the CEO, he shared the number that was mind-boggling. Was 2022 they have one model on the market. This year, by the end of April, they will have a total of 136 models either already on the market or are on order with their system. And the first 100,000 vehicles for them for their system uh, to be delivered took 24 months. The next 100,000 vehicles, 6 months. The third 100,000 vehicles, 3 months. And one of the reasons was they were hot because they had this huge booth inside the OEM hall, thanks to many of the brands that they now exhibit. Uh, so I mean, this company, I think, just even for us who's looking at the market for such a long time, that they just all of a sudden they just exploded right out of
Well,
nowhere.
I wouldn't say they
And
exploded, like, because we've known about
yeah,
them for quite a while.
sure,
They've
but
just been under the radar, but they've been high profile because Toyota and GM have invested in them, in the China market specifically. And so it makes sense that they would be part of a GM's portfolio of new products, Toyota's portfolio of new products. Now, that gives them a step ahead, but this tells me that they're prepping for an IPO or some form of
they are,
investment.
they
So,
are, and they're
um,
going to be in the Mercedes CLA as well, the locally produced. So that's
yeah.
open secret. Uh,
Now, will they make it to US roads? Likely not. Will they make it to Middle Eastern roads? Probably. In European
mhm.
roads, maybe. So, their strong relationships with the foreign brands give them a better chance of entering the foreign markets. But uh, they were high profile 5 or 6 years ago, and then they were pretty quiet as Pony IPO'd, as WeRide IPO'd. And they've kind of taken the place of like an Auto X
Mhm.
as kind of second, third place within the robotaxi space. Deep Route is up there as well, but they have lesser profile, and I think Deep Route is also looking to raise some capital. So,
Yeah. And then speaking of chips, right? The ET5 we drove has four Orin X chips. And Li Bin wants to save money. Right? He mentioned how much money he could save by just putting on one 10G 9311. I think that was the chip. And then the other company is obviously Horizon Robotics, right? That they're going into more vehicles and collaborations. They just signed deals with Bosch, Conti, and Denso to provide. And interestingly enough, speaking of Buick, the other thing was surprising was Bosch is working with Qualcomm's 8775 chip on the Buick Electrics for the ADAS. That was the first time Buick actually said they're going to be the first to put in this Qualcomm's latest chip, ADAS chip. I think things are just being mixed up, right? It's going all over the places. The
well,
competition.
effectively,
People are fighting. People
you, you
are you know.
well, this is the thing. This goes back to the differentiation, right? And
Yeah,
I got to run pretty soon. So,
sure, sure,
um,
sure.
if you recall, I went to San Diego to that Qualcomm event. and they were really, really touting their digital chassis and their entire suite solution, full full stack solution for not only the infotainment but intelligent driving. And I did meet up with Qualcomm in China during the auto show. So it should be noted that they're like Nvidia. They have 90% of coverage for the Chinese EV makers, because what's running the infotainment in a lot of these cars, Snapdragon. And so they're touting the intelligent driving as well. And what's likely going to happen is that Jensen sees that these orange chips and what will become Thor chips are probably commanding too high of a price. He's going to drop prices on these chips if the United States lets him. Now, the difference between an NVIDIA orange chip and let's say Horizon or Chenxing Neo chip is that Neo is running 5 nanometers, and so they're still a ways behind NVIDIA, quite a ways, and
Yeah.
it's still not proven that in Neo or an SMIC can really mass produce these at scale into hundreds of thousands of vehicles. And so I think that's really important to keep an eye on, uh, because the pricing of NVIDIA chips are likely going to get squeezed because of all these competitors that see NVIDIA as too powerful. And a way to differentiate yourself is probably not use the same hardware as your competitor.
Yeah.
How effective in in speed and compute these
The
competitor chips are remains to be seen. But
the
until
the,
they're not, NVIDIA is the standard.
the China smart EV space is such a mad scramble on so many fronts. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
You talk about chips, you talk about batteries, talk about smartification, driving, ADAS, cockpit.
We didn't even talk about the CATL3 updates to
Yeah,
their
they
products.
announced
So
three different products in one shot.
we
And
could do
then
that next time.
yeah, and then a couple other models I should mention. I thought the BYD Dynasty D and Ocean S was an upgrade of their current design styling. I like them really a lot. I think there's still a lot of improvement that BYD can do. And then there was a Denza Z concept, and then Yang Wang came out with a UAL, bigger than bigger. And
So
that's probably it about the auto show, and we should probably wrap it up.
let's go to the comments real
Some
quick.
questions? Yeah.
SPX asks, can the same car swap its battery tech potentially from 80 kilowatt hour LFP NMC to 150 kilowatt hour semi solid state for longer range when needed? Uh,
I think the
don't know
answer is
that yet.
yes. I think the answer
So
is yes, and Neil actually wants it to happen. And by the way, we didn't figure this out. There were 100 kilowatt hour batteries available in some of the swap stations, but I think all the 6 swaps were the standard 75 kilowatt hour batteries. Maybe we have to find out how we can do that, but um, I think the aim should be for you to be flexible enough to swap in a bit of bigger battery for longer range. I don't see why that can't happen.
I think it points to yes, but I do believe that there are software hardware constraints that need to be thought through. From a software standpoint, uh, it definitely needs to be understood, because the BMS now is dealing with a lot of different things. The battery management. I'm not saying it's impossible,
Yeah.
but that would be the goal. I don't know how easy it is. SPX,
And then
and
the
then
wild card is for the Firefly to be able to swap at the CATL's Choco swap stations.
yeah. So
We're
his
still
next
waiting for that.
question, or their next question: any news or time frame about Neo CATL battery swap partnership?
What we do know is that on August 1st, was it, that the BAAS for the Firefly will be announced? So I think look for a possible announcement of the CATL partnership.
And then our friend of the show, Felix, we
Oh,
saw
which we
him
met.
at
Yeah,
Shanghai.
at the teacher
Super,
event. Yeah.
super enthusiastic about the China EV space. His comments, I really want to drive with you next time, not just bumping into us. I'm so ready for that Max episode. I think he's referring to the roundtable episode. 2 hours, it's a luxury I cannot wait for. What a treat.
Thank you.
The luxury of listening to residents is amazing. Audio is the only thing that matters. Thank you, because I do have a face for radio. Thanks for
Thank you
sharing
so
the
much.
AUDI. Asleep at the wheel. So, hey, this was good. Your system worked the entire time, Lei? I think there was only
Well,
a couple of
it's
hitches.
33% uploading, so I have to leave it on.
Oh, wow, that's it? Okay. Anyways, hey, everyone. Apologies for being away from the show for a couple of weeks. We do have some recorded content that I'll be posting hopefully in the next week, including uh, a show that we recorded while we were driving the ET5, and then the special Max episode roundtable. But
Yeah.
hopefully, we will be back at this again, same bat time, same bat channel next week, with Lei, still in
Sure.
China. But thanks again for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Have a good weekend.
And yeah, and a special appreciation to Neil. I got this nice Firefly purple T-shirt.
Nice.
Yeah, so hopefully I get a chance to drive one when I'm here.
Dude, I gotta get one of those freaking
Yeah,
t-shirts. I didn't want to wait in any of those lines to get that stuff, or I didn't want to scan too many QR codes and get bombarded and stuff. And I was like, if I like something, I'll ask for it separately. But they
sure.
had the cool Firefly bags. I thought those were pretty
I got
cool.
that.
But
I got that.
so,
But you
and
have to
I
post on Xiaohongshu or something.
yeah, I don't really need to do that. So, and I wasn't trying to bring home a million things. So, anyways,
I'm gonna,
everyone.
I'm gonna carry a Firefly bag in my local Trader Joe's. uh,
Have a good weekend,
all
everyone.
right. Yep.
We'll
Have a
see you
good
later,
weekend.
man.
Thanks for tuning in. Yep.